And our next guest has actually written a book about I spent a number of hours with him, about 5 hours, as the presiding medical officer during the initial incarceration of him, and that personal riveting account of the former Iraqi dictator's capture, and all of the events I just described are part of this book called A Night with Saddam. We are pleased to welcome to the Scott Hennen Show and the Common Sense Club, Dr. Mark Green. Dr. Green, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about you guys?
Wonderful. Appreciate you joining us, and congratulations on the book. Until I saw the details on the book, I guess I'd forgotten how long it had been since Saddam was captured. But boy, it's one of those events you just remember, because that butcher, that tyrant, captured was really said a lot when you saw the pictures of his palaces and everything else, and contrasted that with a guy crawling out of a hole. Pretty phenomenal. Bring us back to when you first encountered him, and how you knew he was coming your way.
Well, I was actually the physician, the special operations physician covering the target. So the shooters are down doing their work, and I'm in a helicopter standing by waiting to come pick up casualties. And I'm obviously got the same comms or communications that they have. I'm listening to the code words as they pass, and I hear the code word that says, we've got him. And we're in the back of this helicopter that's actually a fairly large one, so we're doing high fives in the back of the helicopter, almost a year's worth of work to get this guy. But I actually met him later that evening. I had to stay over the target because the shooters stayed over the target. Another physician got to do that initial physical exam, but then left, and I got back to the facility, the interrogation facility where he was kept. The guy in charge of the task force said, "Hey, Mark, we want a doc to stay with him all night. Would you go in and spend the first night with him?" And I thought, well, of course I will. And I grabbed a Stars and Stripes magazine and walked into the cell, and it was Saddam, myself, and an interpreter.
Amazing. And when you talk about hovering over that site, I just have a mental picture of the operation that went into that capture. And I know you talk a lot in your book about the sacrifice and the commitment of the brave special operations soldiers. But bring us a little insight into what goes on in an operation like this, and how that bravery and that commitment of the special ops soldiers are the reason we have Saddam Hussein no longer walking this earth.
Well, it is a very precise, planned operation. The details and methodologies obviously are not something I can disclose, but the character of the operation is precisely planned down to the seconds, coordinated with Air Force people, Army special operators, Army special operations aviation. All of these guys have synchronized everything they're doing down to the second. They're communicating through satellite communications and all of this very complex technology. It takes a very dedicated person to train to get to that level. It takes someone who has sacrificed many days with their families to prepare. So just imagine you're about to deploy to combat. You have an opportunity to go get a last ice cream cone with your daughter, or you can go and train some more. And that dynamic is present in every soldier before he deploys, the special operators even more so. What happens if an AK-47 round takes the guy's life? That extra preparation suddenly is a little less important than that last ice cream cone with your daughter. So that's the dynamic that these guys go through every day in the build-up to deployment. It's what those guys went through before we went over there. And those thoughts were in their head all the time when they go downrange to do missions. Just great Americans. They are completely dedicated to the freedom of this country, to the safety of Americans wherever they go in the world. And they have sacrificed their lives, many of them, and many of them have sacrificed their legs, their arms, and will forever pay the price the rest of, every day of their life going forward. So tough price to pay, but a madman is no longer loose in Iraq, and the Iraqi people have the choice to choose their destiny now, which they didn't have before.
So bring us inside the hours you spent with him, and I would imagine there was a communications barrier there probably. What did you glean from that?
Well, the interesting initiation of our dialogue, which I was sort of seated in the room with an interpreter and Hussein, and Saddam just kind of looks over and waves me over and points to his bicep, and says, "Hey, take my blood pressure," through the interpreter. So I'm sort of right there next to him taking his blood pressure. He's checking me out, and I'm checking him out, and he goes, I wanted to be a doctor when I was young. And that, thought in my head of Saddam Hussein taking the Hippocratic Oath was what began a 5.5-hour conversation of me asking him tons of questions and him basically answering them through the interpreter.
Phenomenal. What most shocked you about what came out of that conversation?
I think the most startling thing, I'm a bit of a history buff, having gone to West Point and I was an infantry officer before I was a physician, so got to medicine very atypically. But and so I knew a lot about Hussein and the history of Iraq. The thing that was the most shocking to me was I asked him why he invaded Iran. Why did you go to war with Iran? His response was, Khomeini and I had made a deal when Khomeini was living in Karbala, hiding from the Shah of Iran. I went down, and at that time, interestingly enough, Saddam was only the second in command of Iraq, but he goes down to Karbala, Iraq, and meets with Khomeini and says, okay, you can hang out here, despite the fact that you're a Shia cleric, and most of our country is Shia, and we're Sunni. You can hang out here, and I'll protect you, and I'll allow this. But when you take over in Iran, you're going to cede some coastline to me so that I can get my oil out of this nation a little easier. And so as he's telling me this, I'm pretty amazed by it. He goes on to say, then when Khomeini did take power in Iran, he reneged on the promise, and so Saddam felt like, well, I'm going to go take the coastline myself. Just knowing that deal was brokered in Karbala between Ayatollah Khomeini and Saddam Hussein is a piece of history that's not out there anywhere except in my book, and I got it from the horse's mouth.
6th anniversary of the capture of Saddam Hussein is this weekend, and this man spent 5 hours with him moments after his capture, first medical guy to treat him. The book is called A Night with Saddam, and details this interview with Saddam on the night of his capture and the missions which led to that meeting. It is a phenomenal book, and by the way, portion of the proceeds actually benefit the Wounded Warrior Project, Night Stalker Association, and Bay Medical Foundation, so it's a worthy cause, too, to purchase this book, and obviously we're just able to scratch the surface in talking about it today, unfortunately, but I hope folks buy the book and take it in, because what a neat story. And I also appreciate, last quick question I'll ask you, Mark, is just about how you weave in the enormous power of prayer and how you believe that played a role in Hussein's capture ultimately, right?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking that question, by the way. But part of the story of the book, really part of the story, I was, of course, a part of this task force. My dad's a pastor in South Mississippi, and he sent a letter out to all of the pastors in South Mississippi requesting that on December the 12th, that Friday, all these pastors and their families would fast and pray that we would capture Saddam Hussein. So my dad and mom both fasted that day, prayed, and of course they added to their prayer, that God, please allow Mark to be a part of it. They knew I was a part of the task force. And so I don't know how many of these pastors in South Mississippi fasted and prayed that Friday, but within hours, because Iraq is 7 or 8 hours ahead of us, within hours, my medics are waking me up and saying, hey, Doc, let's go get him. We think we got him. And, of course, we did. So essentially you got a bunch of guys fasting and praying, let's capture Saddam this weekend. Within hours we capture him, and I personally don't think it's coincidence myself.
No, of course it isn't. Absolutely not. Bronze Star, Air Medal with the V for Valor, the Air Medal, the Combat Medical Badge. This guy's a hero of heroes, and a great book, A Night with Saddam. Dr. Mark Green, thanks for the time today, and we hope folks read the book, okay?
Thank you so much.
Good to talk to you. Take care. We'll take a break, get your market talk numbers in here next with Eugene Grainer from Heartland Investor Services on the Scott Hennen Show and the Common Sense Club. Don't go away.
Hello, this is Scott Hennen, here to tell you a little about something the oil operators in the great state of North Dakota are doing to help reduce their environmental footprint and